What did it give you on a very personal level, do you think?
I think it gave me, I mean, it was, it gave me so much. I've developed deep friendships through this work, and I have women in the community in the Downtown East Side that are lifelong friends now, who come from a very different history and background and walk of life than I do, but where our connection and our love for each other is really profound. And it's a very different relationship than your typical lawyer-client relationship. In fact, I don't usually use the word client because I see Pivot, even though I'm their lawyer, I see us in a really deep partnership in this work as well as lifelong friends. So it gave me that. It has demanded that I walk into what feels like perhaps one of the most controversial issues of our time, and one of the most important, but also one of the most contentious. And so I've had to develop a thick skin and try to survive being at the center of a lot of that controversy and a lot of that debate, and speak about the issue in a lot of contexts where sex workers can't, where they wish they could be there to speak for themselves, but it's too risky to do that personally. And so I end up in the position of having to speak with that community as a representative, although it's not my experience, or I haven't got that direct experience myself, but having to be in the center of kind of a boiling cauldron of controversy. And then also the incredible experience of a decade-long, I mean, for the movement, it's been many more decades than I've been involved, but for me, this decade-long kind of journey to what was an incredible success at the Supreme Court of Canada was just the most amazing recognition that sex workers are right, and we were right, and the case is, was just this incredible culmination of so much work and so much commitment.
I think many people probably say 2 decades ago or just before you thought they would never see that kind of day, actually.
Yeah, well, I was talking to Cheryl Kisselbach, who's one of the plaintiffs and a wonderful friend, one of the plaintiffs in the BC case, and she said she's did sex work for 30 years, has been out of sex work for the last decade, and said she wasn't sure she would see this in her lifetime. She wasn't sure she would be alive to see the day when the court would strike down the laws that so profoundly affected her for decades and decades. And it was really amazing to hear that. I know many women who have passed away in the decade that I've been doing this work, and of course so many women we've lost before I was ever involved. So it's both sad that change takes this long when women's lives are at risk and are being lost all the time, and we see it all the time. And I find it horrifying that change could be so slow, but then when it comes, it's an amazing, incredible moment. So I feel very, very grateful to be part of it.
Do you think it's a victimless crime? I've heard that said, that prostitution is a victimless crime.
Yeah, I'm not sure I love that phrase because I think it means different things to different people. But what I will say is that sex work is a very personal experience, and if you had a community of sex workers here, they would each define their experience in sex work very differently. And I work with women who say, I do sex work and I know when I'm a victim of violence, and I know when I'm not. And I would like for the state and for everyone to value my judgment about when violence is happening to me. So what they're saying is prostitution doesn't feel like violence. But when I do experience violence, I know it, and I want to be able to name it, and I want to be able to go for help. And I work with other women who would love to have to do one more day of sex work. They would like to be out of sex work tomorrow. And for them, it does feel like it's not something they're comfortable doing. It doesn't feel like the right thing for them in their bodies. So it's where I think we need to look at victimization is where sex workers are experiencing it and where they're actually calling out for help and for support. And that has always been the framework and sort of the analysis I've brought to this is I'm going to sit with whatever woman is in front of me, and I'm going to value her experience and value her perspective on what's right for her and her body. And I'm going to hope the police do the same, and I'm going to hope that the system does the same. And what we need to do is we need our criminal laws to be specific to harm, not prostitution, because not all sex workers would say prostitution is harm. And if a sex worker does feel that she's experiencing violence, well, then we need the laws to talk about the violence. And that's what they actually do. If we can get rid of all these laws that actually are overreaching, we can actually start to talk about laws that are specific and to the experience that the sex workers are talking about.
Now, when I first started talking to you about this case, it reminded me of a class action suit, but it isn't a class action suit. So talk a bit about that.
Yeah, so it's not a class action. It's called, it's where you have some laws on the books, and you have some individuals who are affected by those laws who are asking the court for what's called a declaration. They're asking the court to declare those laws as a violation of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And the Charter protects life and liberty and security of the person and equality and expression and a whole range of personal kind of rights and freedoms. And all of Canada's laws and all of BC's laws and everything the government does has to be congruent with those rights. So if you are an individual or a group of people who think that the laws are violating or something the government's doing is violating your constitutional rights under the Charter, you can go to court and ask the court to render a decision on that point. And that's what happened here. Okay. So you do have a group coming forward, and they really were coming forward on behalf of a movement, right? It was, of course, about their particular experiences, but they're seeking change for everyone who's in the industry. And they're also bringing evidence that's about a lot of people beyond themselves. So in the Bedford case, you saw affidavits from dozens and dozens of sex workers. You saw, expert evidence from academics. You saw government reports. So the cases are always much bigger than the people that come forward.
Right.
But you still need those very courageous individuals to come forward. And a class action is a different format because usually in a class action context, you have an individual coming forward on behalf of a class of people who are seeking some kind of damages for some recourse for something that happened to them personally.
Okay, now you were challenged by now correct me if I'm wrong, I might have this wrong, that you were challenged by the federal government for the right to take this to court?
That's right.
Yes. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so this is the twist or the sort of deviation that SWAV and Sherry Kisselbach did not expect. So SWAV is an organization in the downtown east side that is run by and for street-based sex workers. It's a very open, it's referred to kind of in the community as a very low threshold. So that means that they organize the organization so that sex workers, no matter where they're at in their lives or no matter what, they can always participate. So the meetings are held in a very kind of safe and easygoing downtown east side space. Their meetings are short. They make sure that they're very inclusive. And to be a member of SWAV, you just have to have experience in street-based sex work and live in the community. And they're committed to social change. That's their reason for being. The members of that organization, as sex workers, decided that they were committed to challenging Canada's laws, but were not as individuals able to sign up as a plaintiff. As Jane Doe or as Deborah Smith, to say Deborah Smith versus Canada, for a whole bunch of really important reasons. One, because the minute you're Deborah Smith versus Canada, you become Bedford. You become the poster child for this issue, which is a really demanding thing to do. And also, the women who are part of SWAV live with a range of kind of personal challenges, from addiction to health issues to extreme poverty to homelessness. So they, for so many reasons, including the publicity, the possibility of risk, the fact that I as counsel can't keep in touch with them all the time as individuals because they're homeless, they don't have telephones, they're not on email. There are a whole bunch of reasons why for me as counsel and for them as a collective, coming forward as a collective was the safest and best and most supportive way to litigate. And Sherry Kisselbach is a former sex worker who felt that when she was in sex work and living with all of the challenges that came with being a sex worker, including criminalization and arrest, she couldn't bring a challenge forward because she wasn't in a position to do so. So they litigated as a collective and as a former sex worker, and Canada came back with an action, a motion, saying, no, they can't litigate that way. SWAV cannot litigate on behalf of its members because SWAV is an organization that isn't subject to arrest, doesn't have charter rights, and should not be allowed to litigate on behalf of its membership. The members should have to come forward and name themselves. And Sherry is no longer affected by these laws, so she's actually not a directly affected person, and she should not be allowed to litigate. We know she had 30 years of experience. We know she was arrested. We know she suffered violence, but doesn't matter anymore. She's like every other Canadian, is what they said. So we fought that, and it's a long story, but at the end of the day, we succeeded at the Supreme Court of Canada in 2012, which, although it wasn't the case Suave and Sherry set out to bring, was an absolutely enormous victory. It was a unanimous judgment from the 9 justices of the Supreme Court of Canada. It's an amazing judgment because it not only granted them the right and said their voice matters, and it made perfect sense that they wanted to litigate this way, but it actually extends that right to others. And you can imagine so many marginalized groups of people who may not be able to come forward and engage in 10 years of litigation, which is how long these cases are, 7, or these cases take a very long time. They're very stressful. They're very demanding. And so it actually was an incredibly important access to justice case and Suave and Sherry feel so proud to have been able to make that, to swing that door open for access to justice for other groups. And at the same time, it wasn't exactly the case that they were, it wasn't supposed to start out as an access to justice fight, but nevertheless, it was a very important one, and they feel incredibly proud, and they should be.
Okay, so the decision by the Supreme Court of Canada to, I'm not sure what you call it in terms of the law, change the law.
Strike them down.
Strike them down. Were you surprised, were the women surprised that this happened?
Yeah, it's hard to know. I think that, with litigation, with everything in life, you just never know. And so it's very hard when you are so invested to feel confident about these things. And at the same time, if people asked me beforehand, before we went to Ottawa and the judgment was rendered, what do you think is going to happen? My answer was, it's clear to me what the right thing is to do here and what the right thing would be for the court to do. The evidence is clear. The law to me was clear. And it's a courageous move, because there is a controversy that surrounds this, and a fear, frankly, that people have that if you take away these criminal laws, you're kind of lifting the lid off the sex industry, and it's going to be a free-for-all. It's going to be anarchy in the streets. Everybody will be doing sex work, and it'll be Amsterdam, and it'll be Nevada, and it'll be bunny ranches, and they have this very clear and vivid fear. So, with all that said, when the morning the judgment came down, it was not only a success, which was amazing, but it was unanimous, which is rare, where all 9 judges agree. It was a fantastic judgment insofar as it recognized the experience of my clients and the fact that the very, very clear harm and the egregious violence that they have experienced as a result. And that was just clear in the judgment, and it was a recognition that this community really deserved and needed. And so it was an amazing moment. I mean, we were sobbing uncontrollably. I was in Ottawa, and my community, my legal team, and the sex workers were mostly here. We had some with us in Ottawa, mostly here, and it was just a morning it was extraordinary. I don't know if, I hope I experience another one like it, because it was absolutely incredible.
I'm getting the wrap up over here, and there's so much more we could talk about, but very quickly, so what happens next?
So now the court gave this 1 year, they suspended the declaration for 1 year, and now Canada is faced with a decision about what to do next. And so we're in a very interesting conversation with the Conservative government, who obviously has the deciding vote about what's next, and our concern is that they will put new criminal laws in its place. So we're in a really important discussion, and we're giving that, again, our very best effort.
Thank you so much for doing this. And I'm sure the women are involved in that too.
Absolutely.
Discussion.
That's right.
Thanks for joining us.